My name is Vesper. Houston, 2023. A city built on oil rigs and pipelines, now chasing solar farms and wind turbines. It was the kind of place where fortunes were made overnight and lost just as fast. I thought I was building a future here, a stable home, a marriage, a partnership. But I was wrong. It started small. My husband, Adrian, had always been a dreamer. He talked big about innovation and disruption, about beating the giants of oil by blending renewables with storage tech. He said he had the next billion-dollar idea, a startup that could transform everything. Ves, he told me one night, his eyes glowing like he already saw the future. We just need the capital, one big push. I've talked to investors, I've got a prototype, but we need collateral. Collateral, the word stuck like a nail in my chest. He wanted me to mortgage the house, the one my parents left me, the one place that was truly mine. I hesitated, of course I did. But he pressed harder. Do you trust me? He asked, his hand over mine. This is our chance. I promise you, it'll pay off. Trust, that word is poison when it's misplaced. I signed. I let him mortgage the house in both our names. And for weeks after, I watched him throw himself into late-night calls, endless spreadsheets, whispered meetings I wasn't invited to. I told myself he was working for us, until the morning I woke up and he was gone. His closet empty, his laptop missing, his phone disconnected, and from the bank, an email confirming the wire transfer of every last cent of the mortgage loan. $300,000 vanished, along with my husband. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, shaking so badly I could barely breathe. The house felt hollow, the walls echoing with lies. My mind kept replaying his voice. Do you trust me? Do you trust me? And all I could think was, I trusted him with everything, and he burned it to the ground. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the foreclosure notice already looming in my head, when a new email arrived. It was from an unknown address, just one line. If you want your money back, stop looking for Adrian. My heart stopped. I stared at the email, the words glowing against the dark screen. If you want your money back, stop looking for Adrian. My pulse pounded in my ears. Whoever sent this wasn't just warning me, they were daring me, threatening me. For a moment, I almost listened. Maybe if I backed off, I could still salvage the house, rebuild my life without him. But then I thought about the mortgage papers, my parents' legacy signed away, my future stolen. No, I couldn't stop. Not until I had answers. I hit reply. My fingers hovered over the keys, but I didn't type a single word. What would I even say? Whoever sent it didn't want conversation. They wanted silence. And silence was exactly what Adrian was counting on. So I did the opposite. I started digging. First, his emails. I hacked into his old account, one he'd used years ago before he got serious about business. Buried in the inbox were messages from shell companies, investment groups I'd never heard of, and one domain registered just months earlier under his name, Aether Dynamics Energy. A fake company, or maybe his startup. I followed the trail late into the night. LLC filings in Delaware. A bank account tied to an address in downtown Houston. Not an office, but a luxury condo. Rent paid in advance, 6 months. My breath caught. He'd been planning this for a long time. The next day, I drove to the condo tower. Glass and steel rose above me, reflecting the Texas sun. My heart hammered as I stepped into the marble lobby. Hi, I said to the receptionist, forcing calm. I'm here to see Adrian Calloway. She frowned at her computer screen. Sorry, ma'am. No one by that name is listed here. I swallowed hard. What about Aether Dynamics Energy? He has an office. Her polite smile turned thin. No, ma'am, but someone by the name Adrian Cole has a lease here. Cole, not Calloway. My husband had been living under a different name. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. He hadn't just left. He'd erased himself, piece by piece. I walked back to my car in a daze, the Houston heat wrapping around me like a chokehold. But just as I reached for the handle, a man in a dark suit leaned against the vehicle. Sunglasses, unreadable. Mrs. Calloway, he said smoothly. Or should I say, Mrs. Cole? My blood ran cold. Mrs. Calloway, the man repeated, his voice smooth like oil. Or should I say, Mrs. Cole? I froze, every muscle tightening. Who are you? I demanded. He smiled faintly. A friend. Let's just say, I represent interests Adrian owes a great deal of money to. My stomach dropped. Money? I thought he stole from me for his startup, but now it sounded like he owed other people too. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, stepping sideways, trying to put space between us. He slid off his sunglasses, and his eyes were sharp, predatory. Don't play dumb, Vesper. He didn't tell you everything, did he? Adrian isn't just your husband. He's a man who leaves trails of debt and enemies behind him. And now he's disappeared with our investment. I swallowed hard. I have nothing to do with that. He lied to me too. The man leaned closer, his voice lowering. Lies are the only thing he deals in. But here's the problem. When he runs, someone has to pay. And right now, all I see is you. The words sank into me like ice. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to stand tall. You can threaten me all you want, but I won't be scared off. I want my money back. And I'm going to find him. For the first time, the man's smile vanished. Then you're in deeper than you realize. He slipped a card into my hand. No name, just a number. When you get tired of chasing ghosts, call me. We'll be watching. He walked away, disappearing into the Houston crowd as if he'd never been there. I climbed into my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. Adrian hadn't just betrayed me. He'd tied me to something dangerous, something bigger than a failed marriage. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, the card staring up at me like a curse. I opened my laptop and searched the condo records, his false name, his company. And then, hidden in a PDF, I found a transaction, a wire transfer from Ether Dynamics to an offshore account in Belize. My breath caught. He hadn't just stolen my mortgage money, he was hiding millions. And if I followed this trail, I knew I wouldn't be the only one chasing him. Just as I closed the laptop, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Adrian's voice came through the line, cold, calm. Vess, stop looking, or you'll regret it. Adrian's voice on the phone, calm, cold, like a man who'd already practiced saying the words that break people, hung in my ears long after he'd gone silent. I should have been terrified. I was. But fear sharpened into something else. Focus. The kind that strips away pity and replaces it with strategy. First thing that morning, I called a lawyer. Not some TV ad attorney, but a woman recommended by a friend who specialized in fraud, asset recovery, and family law. Her name was Maya Tran. Small frame, sharp eyes, and the kind of steadiness that makes other people feel like liars. Tell me everything, Maya said after I sat down in her office and poured out the whole story. The mortgage, the transfer, the condo, the offshore wire. She didn't interrupt. She took notes, then clicked through databases like a code breaker. You did the right thing coming here, she said finally. This is bad but not hopeless. We can go after the money, we can trace the transfers, subpoena the bank, pierce the corporate veil on Ether Dynamics. You need two things, documentation and patience. Her mouth was a line, and a plan for safety. Patience. I laughed at the word as if it were a joke. Time was the one thing I didn't have. The bank was already moving me toward foreclosure. My house, my parents' house, could be gone in months. Maya set to work. She filed emergency motions to freeze known accounts tied to Ether Dynamics. She issued subpoenas for transaction logs. She called contacts in compliance at the bank and told them to flag transfers out of Belize and any linked shell entities. Meanwhile, I became a different kind of investigator. I rented a cheap burner phone and a dash cam. I dug into Adrian's network, the people he'd met at networking events, the investor dinners, the one-night pitch sessions. I found oblique references to a fund called Meridian Capital. Vague, offshore-friendly, and sensitive to reputation. Whoever Adrian owed, they played in that kind of sandbox. Then I found something else, a small thread that felt like a vein to a much bigger body. A supplier invoice for battery modules that listed Ether Dynamics as a client. But the shipper was a logistics company that also handled heavy equipment for an oil services firm out in Port Houston. Oil services. My stomach dropped. Adrian hadn't just run to hide from me. He'd probably slipped into a network that blurred industry lines. Oil, renewables, shell companies, shadow accounts. That explained the man in the suit. That explained the tone of the threats. Not amateur intimidation, but organized pressure. I needed help on the ground. Maya recommended someone, an old contact who did corporate tracing and could get eyes on the ground without drawing attention. Jonah Reyes, a private investigator who'd worked anti-fraud in the industry. He smelled like coffee and old paper when he walked into my kitchen that afternoon. And he didn't waste time. "We follow the money," Jonah said, flipping open his laptop. He had a map of transfers, timestamps, and a cluster of transactions that funneled into a clearinghouse, a limited partnership in Belize, then dispersed into a web of accounts with names like Meridian Holdings, Astor Group, and a Bermuda LLC I'd never seen before. "Bermuda?" I echoed. "This is bigger than a mortgage. Bigger than us, bigger than Adrian." Jonah pointed to the timestamps. "Look here, 2 big outflows 3 months ago, then smaller routings back over the last 6 weeks. Whoever moved that initial lump is either consolidating it or laundering it through several jurisdictions. But there's a pattern. A certain freight company, Transgulf Logistics, keeps appearing as the beneficiary or intermediary." He tapped the screen. "We can subpoena their contracts and shipping logs if the courts will authorize it." I felt a surge of adrenaline, a slim, furious hope. Maya already had motions drafted. We could drag in the banks and the freight company and start unpicking the web. But the deeper we went, the more dangerous it felt. The man in the suit had said, "We'll be watching." He wasn't bluffing. That evening, I drove past the condo tower where Adrian had rented under the alias, circling the block until streetlights blurred. I watched doors, watched faces, and tried to picture him moving through a life that wasn't mine. A week into the subpoenas and freeze orders, there was a minor victory. The bank confirmed a hold on one passported transfer out of Belize. It wasn't the whole fortune, but it was a crack. We had something tangible, a trail that could be followed by law. Then the threats turned persistent. My brake lines were slashed one night while I slept. A brick through the kitchen window at dawn. Anonymous emails warning me to stop digging or lose more. The sweet, slow drip of escalation that is a bully's way of making you count the cost. Maya advised I get a safety plan. Jonah installed discreet cameras. I changed the locks. And for the first time since Adrian left, I slept with the lights on. But each attack hardened my resolve. Each broken window was an accusation answered not with violence, but with motion. Subpoenas, warrants, paperwork that crawled through jurisdictions and pried open accounts. And then something surprising happened. One of the intermediary accounts made a small payout to a registered energy consultant based in Houston, a name I recognized from an industry conference list. Her public LinkedIn profile was clean, her endorsements glowing. But when Jonah ran a background check, he found shell company tie-ins and a registered address matching one of the freight company offices. She was the perfect middleman. Plausible deniability wrapped in a corporate suit. I sat with her profile open on the laptop, the fluorescent light buzzing above me, and for the first time I tasted a plan that felt like true revenge. Not a moment of personal violence, but a legal, surgical dismantling. Seize assets, expose ties, blacklist the players. If I could legally corner Adrian's backers, reveal the trail, and make the industry see his fingerprints, he couldn't simply vanish into a condo and a new name. He'd be a marked man. But as I was about to email Maya the new lead, my burner phone rang. No number displayed. My thumb hovered, then I answered. A voice filtered, "Stop this now. You don't know what you're getting into." It was not Adrian, not exactly. It was someone colder, layered like a mask. "I know exactly what I'm getting into," I said, my voice steady. And for the first time, I meant it. The line clicked dead. The lights in the street outside my house went out for a second, as if the city itself had held its breath. I looked at the screen. An incoming message. A photo, time-stamped. It showed a crate being loaded onto a freighter in Port Houston. On the crate, Aether Dynamics stenciled in black. Under it, a caption, "You're closer than you think." My hands tightened into fists. I swallowed the fear and pulled up Maya's contact. The photo on my phone wouldn't leave my mind. A crate with Aether Dynamics stenciled in black, being loaded onto a freighter. Jonah leaned over my shoulder when I showed him. "That's Port Houston, Terminal 3, judging by the cranes. If he's moving hardware, it's either a front, or he's actually trying to build something." "Build what?" I whispered. "Doesn't matter. What matters is that shipments leave records, manifests, customs clearance. All of that is trackable. if you know where to look. Maya got us a court order within 2 days, but the logistics company pushed back, citing confidentiality. Jonah smirked when he heard. They'll stall in court, we'll just go in person. The next evening, we drove down to the port. The air smelled of diesel and salt, a heavy mix that clung to the skin. Trucks rumbled past. Stacked containers towered above us, and floodlights carved shadows into the night. Jonah moved like he'd done this before, slipping through side gates with casual confidence. My heart thudded against my ribs with every step, but I kept up. We reached the lot where containers sat in neat rows, hundreds of metal giants painted with names from all over the world. And then I saw it. A container spray stenciled with the Ether Dynamics logo. I stepped closer, fingers brushing the cold steel. The sound of waves echoed faintly. This wasn't just financial fraud. Something physical, tangible, was moving through these crates. Jonah pried open a panel with a tool. Inside, stacked modules gleamed faintly under his flashlight. Batteries, industrial grade. Labeled as renewable energy storage components. But the manifest, folded inside a sleeve, told a different story. The consignee wasn't Ether Dynamics. It was Meridian Capital Holdings. My breath caught. Meridian, the name that kept circling back. Before I could process it, a voice barked behind us. Step away from the container. 2 port security guards stood there, flashlights blinding us. My pulse spiked. Jonah raised his hand slowly, trying to look harmless. This isn't what you think, he said. But the guard's radio crackled, and a distorted voice came through. Hold them. We'll take it from here. Jonah shot me a look, sharp, urgent, and whispered under his breath, Run. My feet moved before my mind caught up. I bolted between rows of containers, heart pounding, metal walls turning into a maze of echoes. Shouts erupted behind me. I didn't stop until I reached the chain-link fence at the far end. My fingers clawed at the metal, adrenaline burning through me, when my phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time, my house, taken from across the street. The caption, You don't run from us, Vesper, not twice. I froze, the weight of both worlds pressing in. The port, the crates, the house, my life. They knew exactly where to find me. The photo of my house stayed on the screen long after the notification faded. My chest felt tight, as though invisible hands were squeezing the air out of me. They weren't just watching me at the port, they were watching me here, at my home. I bolted back inside, locking every door, pulling the curtains shut. My hands shook as I grabbed the baseball bat from the closet, the same one Adrian used to keep for security. I hated that thought, him arming me for comfort while plotting to ruin me. Jonah arrived within an hour, his face grim. He'd gotten away from the guards, though barely. He checked the cameras he'd installed, rewound the feed. At 3 a.m., a dark sedan had slowed in front of my house, headlights off. Someone leaned out the window and snapped a picture. Then they drove off. This is intimidation, Jonah muttered, jaw tight. Classic tactic. They want you rattled. They want you to quit. I'm not quitting, I said, though my voice cracked. Maya came the next morning, coffee in one hand, files in the other. We're filing for an injunction, restraining order too. If we can tie this harassment to Meridian or Adrian's associates, we'll have leverage. But legal papers felt thin compared to the weight of faceless men in cars outside my house. That night, I slept on the couch with the bat across my lap. Every creak of the house set my pulse racing. The silence was worse than noise. It left space for fear to crawl in. And then, at 2:37 a.m., the doorbell rang. I froze, staring at the front door. The cameras showed nothing but shadow. The bell rang again. Jonah's voice crackled through the walkie he'd left me. Don't answer, stay put. But the third ring wasn't a ring at all. It was a heavy bang. Someone was testing the door. I clutched the bat, whispering a prayer I didn't even believe in. The banging stopped. Footsteps crunched in the gravel outside. A car door slammed. Then silence. When dawn broke, I found a note wedged under the doormat. My hands trembled as I opened it. 5 words scrawled in black ink. Adrian belongs to us now. The letters smeared where the paper had gotten wet. Maybe rain, maybe sweat from the hand that wrote it. I sank to the floor, the note in my lap. Adrian had betrayed me, but now I realized he wasn't free either. He was tangled in something deeper, darker. I had a choice. Back away and save myself. Or push further, knowing I'd be walking into the same fire that consumed him. I closed my eyes, hearing his voice in my head again. Do you trust me? This time, my answer was different. No, not anymore. I picked up the phone, called Maya, and said the words that felt like crossing a line. File everything, freeze everything, let's burn them down. We stopped pretending this was just about a missing husband and a stolen mortgage. The moment the man in the suit leaned on my car and called me Mrs. Cole, this was a network, a machine built on plausible deniability and offshore wiring. And I had two tiny tools to pry it open: law and persistence. Maya moved faster than I expected. She filed an emergency asset restraint against the Belize clearinghouse and Meridian-related accounts, citing the wire transfer records Jonah had pulled. She also issued subpoenas to Transgulf Logistics for manifests, bills of lading, and the chain of custody on every container marked Ether Dynamics. I watched her work like it was surgery. Every call she made was precise. Every motion she drafted had a purpose. The courtroom felt like a front line, the judge's chambers, a bunker. Jonah and I handled the street-level work. He put me in an SUV with tinted windows and a hood over my head as we drove to a stretch of Port Houston property, where Transgulf listed a bonded warehouse. He slid me out behind a loading bay, like a spy in a movie. Inside the warehouse, the smell of oil and rubber hit me. Pallets stacked high, forklifts moving like sleepwalkers. Transgulf had 2 large shipping containers with Ether Dynamics painted on their doors. My breath went shallow. Jonah handed me a pair of gloves and a flashlight. We're here to document only. Maya has a court order, but enforcement takes time. We need photographs, serial numbers, and anything that ties these modules to the Meridian accounts. He tapped his ear. If security shows, we back out. No heroics. I understood. The plan was surgical. Document, secure legal seals, then walk in with marshals and handcuffs if the court signed off. The aim wasn't to brawl. It was to show the money trail in a way no one could spin. We photographed manifests, scanned barcodes, copied shipping plates, and even snagged a packing list that listed a destination in the Caribbean that matched the Belize clearinghouse. It was all there: names, dates, signatures. Then the radios lit up. Security moving to Bay 3, possible unauthorized presence. The words were flat, businesslike, then heavier. Legal has a hold. We have orders to stand down. My stomach dropped. Stand down? I whispered. Jonah cursed under his breath and tapped his phone. Maya's voice came through. They filed an emergency injunction. Meridian moved first, a preliminary ex parte order. The bank got a call. They froze the release, but the company claims sovereign or commercial immunity tied to the partnership. I'm fighting it. Don't move. Someone had raced the courts, and for the moment, beaten us to the punch. We left the warehouse with our cameras and notes, but without the satisfaction of seizure. It felt like being punched and told to document the bruise. That night, the threats escalated again. A placard shoved under my windshield read, "Let it go or lose more than money." But there was no letting go. The thought of my parents' house, the creaky porch, the tire swing my father hung for me, kept me wired. They'd taken that and tried to make me a warning. I would not be a warning. Maya didn't sleep. She worked the mobile judge circuits, calling in favors, drafting affidavits, composing emergency applications to federal agencies that handled money laundering and export law. "We'll do a federal SWAT team if we have to," she said once, half joking, half steadying herself. Not necessarily with guns. I mean, civil asset forfeiture, regulatory action, the full weight of compliance. We'll drag Meridian into daylight. Jonah found a small thread the court hadn't yet flagged. A subcontractor who'd handled last-mile trucking for Transgulf. A family-run outfit with sloppy paperwork. Their invoices had been paid in part by a local LLP tied to a name I'd seen on Adrian's email header once. Caldwell Energy Solutions. Caldwell, another plausible corporate citizen, but the kind with festering links. If Meridian's legal machine was fast and expensive, these subcontractors were slow and sloppy. Ideal weak spots. We started to prod. Jonah paid a visit to the trucking yard at dawn. He came back with a photograph of a bill of lading stuffed in a cab glove box, and a receipt for fuel that bore an ink stamp. Transgulf Logistics. Port Ops. Small wins, but wins. Maya used those to show a pattern. Transgulf moving components through Caldwell-like entities and Meridian accounts. It wasn't the whole fortune, but it was a map, a chain. The court listened differently to chains than to accusations. Chains had links. With a war of paperwork unfolding, the personal war crept closer. A box arrived at my house addressed to Adrian. Except the return label was Meridian Holdings. Inside, a stack of white envelopes stitched with fingerprint dust. Each envelope contained a $100 bill and a slip of paper that read simply, "We have eyes." I felt watched, and the closeness of the danger shifted from abstract to personal. But every note, every brick through my window, every slashed tire funneled into evidence. Maya filed them. Jonah cataloged them. And I fed on the data. Each small piece became an ember. Each ember built heat. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, as I sat in Maya's office reviewing an accountant's ledger that quietly linked Caldwell to a Bermuda LLC, Jonah burst in and dropped his phone on the desk. "We found a manifest," he panted. "An internal shipping log, not on the public feed. A freighter scheduled to berth tonight with 2 Ether Dynamics containers marked for transshipment. The vessel's name, MV Coral Dawn." My throat went dry. If the containers left on the Coral Dawn, they'd disappear into global waters and the trail would go cold. Maya's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Then she stood. Her voice was low, hard as metal. "We go to the port tonight. Federal authorities, customs, whoever we can rope in. If the freighter is still in port, we get a warrant to seize before it sails. If it sails, we chase the vessel with a notice to the flag state." We moved fast. Jonah called his contacts in customs. Maya called an assistant at the U.S. Attorney's office. Within hours, we had a judge on the phone and a draft warrant waiting. As we drove toward the harbor in a rain-streaked SUV, headlights cutting through mist, I felt the weight of everything converge. My house, the mortgage notice, my parents' portrait on the mantel. Adrian's face in the dashboard's reflection. The knowledge that if we failed tonight, the money could be gone forever. The harbor lights blurred. A horn bellowed in the distance. We rounded the bend and saw cranes swinging slow and steel ripping at the night sky. And at the quay, the Coral Dawn. Black hull, white name, weighted like a sleeping whale, containers stacked like ribs. My breath shortened. Jonah's phone vibrated. Maya's jaw tightened. The Coral Dawn loomed against the skyline, black steel stacked with secrets. Each container felt like a coffin, hiding pieces of Adrian's betrayal. Maya's phone buzzed with a call from the assistant U.S. attorney. She pressed it to her ear, nodding. "We've got the warrant," she said. "Customs is on standby, but they'll only act if we hand them irrefutable evidence before the vessel departs." Jonah checked his watch. "Sailing time is in 6 hours. 6 hours to expose an empire." We drove closer, weaving through the maze of cranes and trucks until we reached the inspection zone. Customs officers met us, their uniforms stiff under the drizzle. They looked skeptical, almost annoyed at being dragged into a late-night drama. Maya spread out the evidence on the hood of the SUV, the wire transfers, the bills of lading, the Belize accounts. Her voice cut through the rain. "These containers aren't just holding batteries. They're holding the key to a multi-million-dollar laundering operation. And if that ship sails, the trail vanishes across international waters." The senior officer frowned, glancing between the papers and the ship. "You're asking me to halt a vessel on circumstantial ties. That's a big call." Jonah stepped forward. "Then open one crate, just one. If it matches the Belize manifest, you'll have your probable cause." A tense silence. Then the officer barked into his radio. "Bay crew, container AEX 417. Crack it." We followed as the crew hauled the container down, crowbars prying at its steel teeth. The doors groaned open. Inside, batteries stacked in neat rows gleamed under the floodlights. At first glance, they looked legitimate. But Jonah reached in, pulled a panel aside, and revealed what was hidden beneath. Vacuum-sealed bricks of cash, stacked like contraband, stamped with foreign bank seals. My stomach lurched. There it was. Adrian's stolen fortune, multiplied. The officer's jaw tightened. "Seal it. Secure the vessel. No one leaves until this is processed." Relief surged in me, but it lasted seconds, because from the corner of my eye, I caught movement. 2 men in suits watching from the shadows near a stack of crates. One of them raised a phone to his ear, lips curled into a grin. Jonah swore under his breath. "Meridian muscle. They know we've cracked it." Before I could react, my own phone buzzed again. A text. A photo. Adrian, sitting at a table in what looked like a cheap motel room. Hands bound, eyes hollow. The caption, "He belongs to us, and so do you." The world tilted. The crates, the cash, the law. None of it mattered if they had him. Adrian wasn't just a thief anymore. He was a pawn. And I was next. The photo of Adrian burned into my mind. Bound, hollow-eyed, reduced from slick dreamer to bargaining chip. Jonah cursed under his breath. They're baiting you. He's leverage. Nothing more. Maya's gaze hardened. If they're sending pictures, they want a reaction. Don't give it to them. Stay on the legal offensive. But I couldn't silence the storm inside me. Adrian wasn't just a thief who gutted my life. He was my husband. The man I once trusted enough to mortgage the only piece of family history I had left. I whispered, "What if they kill him?" Jonah met my eyes, steady but cold. "Then that's the price he pays for swimming with sharks. Don't drown with him." His words made sense, but my heart ached. The betrayal still cut deep. But so did the memory of Adrian laughing on our porch, his hand over mine, promising me a future. Was I really strong enough to let him die? Maya slid a folder across the SUV's console. "Look, if we keep building the case, Meridian falls. Once they're exposed, Adrian loses his protection. If he's alive, he'll have no choice but to resurface. That's when we take him down legally. No emotion, just justice. Justice." The word rang in me like a bell. But justice and vengeance don't always sit in the same chair. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the photo on my phone glaring like an open wound. I poured a glass of wine, but it tasted like ash. I opened Adrian's old laptop, the one I'd pulled from the closet after he vanished. He had scrubbed most files, but I dug deeper, and there it was. A hidden folder buried under fake tax returns. Inside, a document labeled Meridian, blacklist, names, dates, amounts. A list of people Meridian had squeezed, ruined, or silenced. And near the bottom, Cole, Adrian. 3.2 batters outstanding. My stomach twisted. He wasn't just a thief. He was a debtor. Meridian hadn't partnered with him. They owned him. The buzzing in my head grew louder until I realized it wasn't in my mind. My phone was vibrating again. Another message. This time, a video. Adrian in the motel room. A man's hand gripped his hair, forcing him to look at the camera. A voice distorted. "Vesper, you have what we want. Documents, evidence, deliver them. Or Adrian disappears forever." The screen went black. My hands shook. They knew I was building a case. They knew I had a choice. Jonah's words echoed, "Don't drown with him." But Maya's counsel whispered too. "If he resurfaces, we take him down legally." I stared at the video one last time. Then I whispered to myself, "I won't drown, but I won't walk away either." And I hit record on my burner phone, preparing a message for Meridian. Not surrender, not silence. A move of my own. I stared at the blinking red light on my burner phone. Every second recording felt like loading a weapon. When the message was done, I replayed it once. My voice sounded steady, but inside I was shaking. "Meridian," I said into the lens. "You've made your point. You have Adrian. But I have something you don't. The chain. Documents, transfers, manifests. You want to silence me? Fine. But the second you lay a hand on me, or on him, everything goes public. I've got timed releases, and the world will see every dollar you've laundered." I leaned closer, my eyes burning into the lens. "So go ahead. Kill him if you think it'll stop me. I'll burn you down with him." Then I hit send. Jonah looked at me like I'd just pulled the pin on a grenade. "That was reckless," he hissed. "Maybe," I whispered, "but reckless is all they understand." For hours, nothing, just the rain against the windows and the thrum of my pulse. Then, near dawn, a reply came. A video. Adrian again, but this time, no hands on him. Just him, alone, staring into the lens. His lips cracked, voice low. "Ves, stop, please. You don't know what you're up against. They'll kill us both." And then, before the camera cut, I caught it. A flick of his eyes to the left, like he was signaling something. A tiny movement, but unmistakable. I froze the frame, zoomed. Behind him on the motel wall was a crooked painting, a gaudy desert scene, my breath caught. I'd seen it before. The Desert Rose Motel, a place on the edge of town where Adrian and I once stayed after a fight years ago. Cheap, run down, unforgettable because of that ugly painting. "He's here," I whispered. "He's still in Houston." Jonah grabbed his jacket. Then we move now before they move him again. Maya raised a hand, her lawyer's instinct flaring. Careful. If you storm in, it could be a trap. And if you cross the line, you compromise every legal gain we've made. I stood, fire in my chest. Trap or not, this ends tonight. We drove fast, the city still asleep, headlights slicing through the wet streets. My hands clenched around the bat in the back seat, the same one I'd once held in fear. Now it felt like resolve. As the neon sign of the Desert Rose came into view, flickering like a dying heartbeat, I knew there was no turning back. We parked in the shadows. Jonah checked his pistol, nodding at me. Maya stayed in the car, phone ready to dial federal backup. I stepped out, rain pattering on the cracked asphalt. The motel door where Adrian's video had been shot was only yards away. And then, as I reached for the handle, it creaked open on its own. A hand slipped out, pale and shaking. Adrian's. His voice was a rasp. "Ves, don't!" And in the silence that followed, a shadow moved behind him. The door swung wider, creaking like a warning. Adrian's face appeared in the dim light, pale, sweat clinging to his temples. His lips trembled as he whispered again, "Ves, you shouldn't have come." I pushed inside, ignoring him. The room reeked of mildew and cheap whiskey. The crooked desert painting glared down at us like a mocking witness. And then I saw him. A man in a charcoal suit sat in the corner, legs crossed, hands calm on his knees. The same man who had leaned against my car weeks ago. His smile was a blade. "Mrs. Calloway," he said smoothly. Or should I say, "Mrs. Cole." My throat tightened. "You again." He nodded once. "Me again. You've been busy. Courts, customs, warrants. Quite an impressive run for a woman who used to worry about mortgage payments." My pulse hammered, but I kept my voice steady. "Where's the rest of your crew?" He chuckled. "Watching? Always watching. You forced our hand, Vesper. But here's the thing. You think you've cornered us with your documents, your lawyers, your little investigator friend. You're wrong." Adrian shifted in the chair, rope burns on his wrists. He tried to speak, but the man silenced him with a flick of his hand. "You see, Adrian here owes us more than money. He owes us loyalty. And so do you. But you've been stubborn." His eyes glinted like knives. "Tonight you choose. Walk away from this crusade, or watch him disappear for good." I clenched my fists. "You think threatening me with him will make me stop? He betrayed me. He stole everything. Why should I care what happens to him?" Adrian's voice cracked. "Ves, I'm sorry. I thought I could fix it. I thought—" "Shut up," the man snapped. He leaned forward, his tone dropping to ice. "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about control. We control the money, the movement, the silence. And if you don't step aside, we'll control the narrative of your little life too." My heart pounded, fury warring with fear. Every instinct screamed to smash his smug smile with the bat I carried. But I forced myself to breathe, to think. Because I knew he was right about one thing. This wasn't about Adrian anymore. It was about Meridian. About power and who would keep it. I locked eyes with Adrian, then with the man, and in that moment I realized something. They wanted me to choose between love and survival, between mercy and vengeance. But there was a third choice. My lips curved into the faintest smile. "You want control? Fine. But you underestimated me. I didn't come here to beg. I came here to end this." The man's smile faltered for the first time. He tilted his head, curious. Behind me, I felt Jonah's shadow fill the doorway. He had followed me in silence. And in his hand was not just a pistol, but a small recorder, the red light blinking. Every word spoken in that room was now evidence. The man's eyes narrowed. Adrian gasped. And the storm finally broke. The silence snapped like a wire under tension. The man in the suit rose slowly from his chair, adjusting his cufflinks as if this were a boardroom, not a hostage room. "Clever," he said, his eyes flicking toward Jonah's recorder. "But clever doesn't keep you alive." Jonah raised his pistol just enough to make his point. "Neither does arrogance. Sit down." For a moment, the air was nothing but rain pattering on the thin motel windows, and the sound of my heartbeat rattling in my ears. Adrian's gaze darted between us, wide with panic. "Ves, please, don't do this. You don't know." "Quiet," Jonah snapped. I stepped forward, bat still in my hand, the weight familiar now. "You wanted me to choose? Between backing down and watching him die? I choose something else. I choose to fight." The man's smile returned, sharp and cold. Fight? You don't understand, Vesper. We don't lose. You may win a skirmish, but we own the war. We own the ports, the judges, the markets. And when the dust settles, you'll be nothing but a footnote. Maybe, I said softly, but footnotes still ruin the story when they tell the truth. Jonah pressed the recorder closer. Keep talking, he said. Tell us everything about Meridian. This whole thing is going straight into evidence. The man tilted his head, studying us. Then he laughed. You think a toy recorder changes anything? Even if you drag me into court, there's another behind me and another behind him. We are endless. My grip tightened on the bat. My whole life, the house, the mortgage, the betrayal, had been reduced to a single word on his lips. Endless. Like we were nothing. And then Adrian moved. He lurched forward, knocking his chair sideways, and shouted, Ves, behind you! I spun just in time to see a second man stepping out of the bathroom, gun raised. My body reacted faster than thought. I swung the bat with every ounce of rage, the crack echoing as it smashed into his arm. The gun clattered to the floor. Jonah dove, grabbing it before the man could recover. He pinned him against the wall, weapon trained steady. The man in the suit clapped slowly, mock applause. Impressive. So the little homemaker has claws after all. I stalked closer, bat raised again. Call me that again, and I'll show you just how sharp they are. For the first time, his mask slipped. His smile faltered, his jaw tightening. Maya's voice crackled through Jonah's earpiece. Customs and federal marshals are rolling in. 15 minutes out, hold the line. 15 minutes, that was all we had to survive. The suited man leaned back, hands raised slightly, as if surrendering. But his eyes burned with something else. Calculation. And then from the corner of the room, Adrian whispered the words that made my blood run cold. Ves, he's not the one in charge. He's just the messenger. Adrian's words sliced through the room like a blade. He's just the messenger. The man in the suit didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled again, slow and deliberate. Smart, Adrian, but not smart enough to save you. Jonah pressed his gun harder into the second man's ribs. Then who is it? Who's pulling your strings? The suited man spread his hands. Meridian doesn't have a face. We're a consortium, a machine. When one cog breaks, another turns. His eyes flicked to me. But if you're desperate for a name... He paused, savoring the moment. Caldwell. The word hit me like a punch. The same name I'd seen buried in Adrian's old emails. Caldwell Energy Solutions. The phantom company paying invoices, laundering invoices, connecting the dots. Adrian shook his head violently. No, Ves. You don't understand. Caldwell isn't just a company. He's a man. Richard Caldwell, CEO. He's been running this operation for years. The man in the suit chuckled. And unlike me, he doesn't make house calls. He doesn't need to. Jonah's eyes hardened. Caldwell's real. We thought he was just a shell. Adrian's voice cracked. He's real. He's worse than real. And if you keep pushing, he won't just come after me. He'll come after you. The words hung heavy in the stale motel air. For the first time, I felt the scope of the enemy stretch far beyond these walls. Not just suits and smugglers, but a man powerful enough to warp entire systems. Courts, banks, maybe governments. I forced myself to speak, though my throat was dry. Then let him come. I'm done being afraid of shadows. The suited man tilted his head, almost pitying. You say that now, but Caldwell already knows your name, Mrs. Cole. He already knows where you live, what you eat, what color the curtains are in your kitchen. He doesn't need to threaten you. He just waits. The motel light flickered. Rainwater dripped steadily from the ceiling into a rusty bucket. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed. Jonah's earpiece crackled. Federal units are 2 minutes out. The man smiled wider, as if this were his victory. Then I suppose my time here is up. He didn't fight when Jonah cuffed him. He didn't resist when the marshals stormed in minutes later. He just kept smiling, like he knew something we didn't. As they dragged him out, Adrian whispered, Ves, you don't know what you've started. Caldwell won't let this stand. I looked at Adrian, my chest burning with betrayal and fury. Good, because neither will I. But even as the words left my lips, a chill spread through me. Because deep down, I knew the man was right. Caldwell wasn't a shadow anymore. He was watching, and he was waiting. The motel room felt hollow after the marshals dragged the suited man away. The stench of mildew clung, but what lingered most was his smile. That arrogant curl of the lips that said, "You haven't even touched us yet." Maya's voice cut through my thoughts. "We've got him in custody. With the recordings, it's solid. He'll be arraigned by morning." Jonah shook his head grimly. "That guy was a pawn. Caldwell won't blink losing him." Adrian slumped against the wall, wrists raw. "You don't get it. Caldwell doesn't fight in the open. He doesn't need to. He'll just tighten the net around you until you can't breathe." I stared at him, anger boiling. "And you helped him build that net." His eyes dropped. For once he had no defense. We escorted Adrian out, the neon desert rose buzzing faintly behind us. Rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy, charged. Back at Maya's office, we spread the evidence across her oak desk. Wire transfers, fake invoices, offshore accounts. Jonah traced the chain with a marker. "This all converges here, Caldwell Energy Solutions. Richard Caldwell, CEO, untouchable billionaire." Maya tapped the desk. "If we take him down, it won't be through state court. It'll take federal agencies, maybe international law. He's bigger than Meridian. Meridian is him." Adrian whispered, "You don't understand. Caldwell has senators in his pocket, judges, bankers. He built a safety net so wide you can't touch him." I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. "Everyone thinks that. That's why he's still standing. But I've already cracked his armor once, and I'll keep swinging until he bleeds." That night, I drove home alone. The city lights blurred in my windshield. I wanted to believe the fight was shifting in our favor. But when I pulled into my driveway, I froze. A black SUV idled at the curb. Its headlights were off, but the silhouette of the driver was unmistakable. Watching, waiting. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number." I answered, heart pounding. A deep, calm voice filled my ear, smooth, deliberate. "Vesper Cole, you've caused me quite a bit of trouble." My breath hitched. "Caldwell." He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. His tone was worse, measured, confident. "You think you've exposed me. You think seizing a few containers makes a difference. But while you chase shadows at the port, I'm already moving billions elsewhere. You can't stop me, and you won't survive trying." I gripped the wheel, forcing steel into my voice. "You made a mistake, Caldwell. You underestimated me." A soft laugh rolled through the speaker. "No, Vesper, I counted on you. You were always the unpredictable one. That's why Adrian was useful. He gave me a window into you." My skin crawled. Adrian, even his betrayal, had been part of Caldwell's design. The line crackled. "You want a war, Mrs. Cole? Then war it is. But know this. When you lose, no one will even remember your name." The call ended. The SUV pulled away, vanishing into the night. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just fighting for justice or revenge anymore. I was fighting for survival. Caldwell's call left a chill that didn't fade. He'd spoken calmly, but his reach was the thunder behind that calm. I could feel it in the way my phone buzzed, in the way the SUV had sat idling like a shadow outside my house. You don't beat a man who controls courts and banks by yelling into voids. You beat him where he isn't expecting the fight. Regulation, reputation, and relentless paperwork. That was Maya's language. That was Jonah's instinct. And it had to be mine now. We met at dawn in a diner off I-10, the city still half asleep. Maya spread a folder of options across the Formica table. Civil suits, criminal referrals, international asset freezes, coordinated disclosure to regulators and the press. Each option was a lever. Each lever risked something. My safety, Adrian's life, the lawyer's ability to prosecute without taint. "Public exposure is the key," Maya said, tapping a page with a court seal. "If we can align the Department of Justice, major financial regulators, and an investigative newsroom, we make it costly, politically and economically, to protect Caldwell. We turn his stealth into a flashing neon problem." Jonah added, "And we'll need witnesses. We need insiders who will talk under subpoena. People within Caldwell's orbit who can confirm patterns of behavior. That's how you pierce the armor." I thought of Adrian, of his face in that motel room, of the rope burns. The man who'd emptied our savings had a frightened human inside him now, and the calculus had shifted. I wouldn't trade his life lightly, but neither would I let Caldwell's shadow swallow every truth. We recruited an investigative reporter, Layla Park, a city columnist who had a reputation for dismantling corporate myths with footnotes and FOIA requests. She met with us in a church parking lot, nervous but hungry. "Expose me to the spotlight," she said, "and I'll make him bleed on paper." Her network's editor promised embargoed publication once legal triggers were lined up. We also went for policymakers. Maya called an old contact at the Senate Judiciary Committee, a staffer sympathetic to anti-money laundering work, and quietly laid out the evidence. The staffer's voice lowered. "If your paperwork checks out, we can get a hearing, public hearing, that'll get him under oath. That'll make people in banks and agencies sweat." It began to feel like a pincer, legal force on one side, political heat on the other, and media light threatening to expose everything in the middle. We built a timeline. Step 1. Federal prosecutors file a sealed indictment around a subset of transfers traced to Caldwell-controlled entities. Step 2. Layla's piece drops the same day, but timed so that public outrage meets legal action. Step 3. Regulators freeze additional accounts based on subpoenas and the public pressure. Step 4. International partners notify flag states and intercept any departing vessels. Sounded neat on paper. In practice, it was messy and slow, and it required trust at every link. That's where the problem hit. You can align institutions, but you can't control a human heartbeat. A junior analyst at one compliance desk texted Jonah, "Are you sure we should push? We're getting pressure from upstairs to stand down." Pressure from upstairs meant phone calls, meant reputations on the line. It meant Caldwell had already moved a pawn inside the palace. Maya didn't flinch. She drafted an emergency package to the U.S. attorney and attached the analyst's text as part of a timeline of interference. "If they're being leaned on," she said, "we show the pattern. We don't hide it." That meant raw nerve. Expose the pressure as part of the case and risk spooking the very bureaucrats who would act. While paperwork crawled toward warrants, Jonah and I worked on the human angles. We located a logistics manager who'd quietly kept copies of Transgulf freight manifests, a man tired of being the cog. He agreed to talk under subpoena. We found a bank officer who had lied on an internal memo to cover a transfer and who, once given immunity, was horrified and candid. Little fractures formed in the huge machine. The videos of cash in containers, the bills of lading, the internal emails. They started to map to Caldwell's signature patterns. We weren't just making noise anymore. We were building a case story that a jury and a public could follow. Then the escalation began. An unmarked envelope arrived at Maya's office. Inside, a single camcorder tape and a note. "Stop. Or next time, it's someone else." The tape showed footage of Jonah's sister, a woman who worked nights at a coffee shop and who had nothing to do with our case, smiling as she locked up one evening. The last frame froze on a license plate. Someone was closing the circle. Caldwell's reach was now personal. I wanted to scream, to run, to pull every lever and burn the machine down by myself. Instead, I called Layla and said one sentence: "Prepare to publish early if we go dark." Then I called Maya and asked the question I'd avoided. "If they take Adrian quiet, do we have enough to clean house without him?" Maya's answer was a flat, brittle truth. "Maybe, but it's riskier. We'll need to move faster and use the public to lock institutions into action." We had two choices: play by the long, surgical rulebook and risk the people we loved, or turn everything into an immediate public firestorm that might save lives, but also blow up the legal case. I thought of my parents' porch swing and the mortgage paperwork, now tiny actors in a global theater. There was no purity left in this fight. There was only risk, and the question of which risk I'd accept. That night, I stood in my dark kitchen, phone buzzing with updates, and made a decision I'd promised myself not to make. We would synchronize the indictment, the regulatory freezes, and Layla's exposé for the same morning. If Caldwell tried to move the money, the world would already be watching. And that watchful world would make it much harder for him to disappear Adrian. I sent 3 emails. Then my phone lit up with a single incoming call. "Unknown, blocked, international," I answered. A voice I didn't need a name to recognize spoke softly, almost kindly. "Mrs. Cole, you are very brave, but bravery without protection is merely foolishness. Tonight, at midnight, your home will go dark." The line went dead. The lights in my kitchen flickered twice and then went out. The lights died with a click, plunging my house into darkness. For a heartbeat, all I heard was my own breath. Shallow, jagged, and the tick of the cooling refrigerator. Then, headlights flared through the window. A car idled in the street, its beams sweeping across the walls like searchlights. I grabbed the bat and crouched low, phone buzzing in my pocket. Jonah's voice crackled through the line. "They cut your power. I'm 5 minutes out. Stay put. Don't open the door for anyone." Maya texted at the same time. "The indictment is signed. DOJ greenlit. Layla's piece runs at 8 a.m. sharp. Hold the line. Hold the line." It was easy to say when you weren't staring at your house becoming a target. The SUV outside didn't move. The lights stayed on, humming like a warning. I crept to the window, peeking through the slats. A man sat in the driver's seat, silhouette sharp against the glow. He wasn't moving either, just waiting. Then my phone vibrated again. A photo, my front porch, the bat in my hands, the message, "We see you." My stomach dropped. If they could take that picture, it meant someone was closer, already inside the perimeter. I bolted for the back door, heart hammering. My hand touched the lock when a voice came from the shadows of my kitchen. "Going somewhere?" I spun, bat raised. A man leaned against the counter, calm as if he belonged there. No mask, no pretense. His suit was damp from the rain, his shoes tracking mud across the tiles. He smiled faintly. "Mrs. Cole, Caldwell sends his regards." I swung. The bat connected with the counter as he stepped aside, the crack echoing through the dark. He didn't flinch. He didn't rush. He just shook his head like a disappointed teacher. "You can fight, but you won't win." Caldwell already set the board. Tomorrow morning, when you think you're exposing him, he'll expose you. The world will see you as a bitter wife, lashing out after being scorned. I snarled, teeth clenched. "Then why are you here? If Caldwell's so untouchable, why send you crawling through my kitchen?" His eyes glittered in the dark. "Because even pawns can break queens before the game ends." Before he could move again, headlights swept across the back window. Tires screeched outside. Jonah's voice boomed from the porch. "Federal agents, drop it!" The man slipped back, vanishing through the shadows like smoke. By the time the door burst open, he was gone. But on the counter, he'd left something. A thin envelope, damp with rain. I tore it open, hands shaking. Inside was a single document, a forged email chain. At the top, my name. At the bottom, a line that made my blood run cold. Confirmed payments authorized by V. Cole. They were framing me, and tomorrow morning, when the indictment and exposé went live, Caldwell would already have a countermove waiting. Morning came too fast. I hadn't slept. The forged email chain lay on my kitchen table like a venomous snake, waiting to strike. At 8:01 a.m., my phone exploded with alerts. News notifications, email pings, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Layla's exposé had dropped. The headline glared in bold on every feed. "The Caldwell Empire, Energy Titan Accused of Global Money Laundering." The article was fire. It had everything. Wire transfers, customs leaks, freight manifests. My voice was in it too, quoted from late-night interviews where I'd described the betrayal, the mortgage, the trail of shell companies. People were listening. The story was moving. But just as quickly, Caldwell's countermove hit. Another headline began trending only minutes later. "Whistleblower tied to fraud. Documents show V. Cole-approved payments." My heart clenched. They'd released the forged emails. Clean PDFs, perfect headers, timestamps. Caldwell had outplayed us. Maya called, voice taut. "They're pushing it to every outlet. We can disprove it, but the narrative is live now. They're painting you as the bitter wife trying to frame her husband's boss." Jonah broke in from another line. "It doesn't matter if it's fake. What matters is who believes it first. And right now, half the internet thinks you're Caldwell's accomplice." I sank into a chair, phone buzzing nonstop. Old coworkers messaged me with cautious sympathy. Strangers filled my inbox with hate. A neighbor texted, "Saw the news. Is it true?" The betrayal wasn't just Adrian anymore. It wasn't just my husband. It was the world deciding if I was villain or victim. And then, the worst hit. A subpoena alert. Not for Caldwell, for me. The DOJ was compelled to investigate the new evidence. I wasn't a witness anymore. I was a suspect. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to listen. Maya whispered, "This is exactly Caldwell's strategy. He knows if you're indicted, you lose credibility as a whistleblower. Even if you're cleared later, the damage is done. He wins the long game. Jonah's tone was harder, so we don't let it play long. We pivot. If the public thinks you're compromised, then we burn brighter. We release everything, raw documents, audio, videos, force it all into daylight before he buries you. I looked at the forged emails, at the venom in print. My hands trembled, but not with fear anymore, with rage. This isn't just about him stealing my money or wrecking my marriage, I said softly. This is about every person he's silenced with power, every pawn he's crushed. If they want me to be the villain, fine. But I'll be the kind of villain who takes a king down with her. The room was silent for a beat. Then Jonah said, "All right, then we go nuclear." As if on cue, another alert flashed on my phone. Live footage of Caldwell himself. He stood behind a polished podium, cameras flashing, flanked by lawyers and PR handlers. His voice was calm, measured, practiced. Meridian has always operated with integrity. We welcome the Department of Justice's review. And while we sympathize with Mrs. Cole's personal hardships, we must clarify. She was in fact a former consultant who approved transactions now under investigation. He smiled for the cameras, not the smile of a man caught, the smile of a man rewriting the script. I stared at the screen, jaw tight. He wasn't hiding anymore. Caldwell had stepped into the spotlight and turned it into his stage. The war wasn't in the shadows now, it was out in the open. And I had one shot left, to make sure the world saw him for what he really was. The moment Caldwell's press conference ended, the narrative tilted. Reporters flooded my inbox with questions. My face was splashed across live TV alongside the words, fraud and whistleblower. Maya, Jonah, and I regrouped in her office, blinds drawn, phones buzzing nonstop. The forged email sat on the table like a curse. Jonah slammed his fist down. If we don't hit back now, he wins. By tomorrow, everyone will believe you forged the fraud, not him. Maya's eyes were sharp, resolute. Then we burn it all. Every transfer, every hidden video, every statement from insiders. We go nuclear. No redactions, no delay. I stared at the evidence pile. Once it left our hands, there was no taking it back. Caldwell would retaliate harder. He'd try to bury us in lawsuits, threats, maybe worse. But silence wasn't survival anymore. It was surrender. I nodded. Do it. We moved fast. Layla met us in a parking garage with her laptop, her hands shaking but her eyes blazing. "If you're sure," she whispered. "I'm sure," I said. "Let the world see everything." By midnight, the exposé had doubled in size. Not just Caldwell's shell companies, but raw audio of his lieutenants threatening ports, videos of cash-stuffed containers, bank statements leaked from whistleblowers, even a clip of Adrian, voice cracking, admitting his role in Caldwell's setup. Layla's editor called it the kind of story that topples giants. He promised it would hit at dawn across every major network. But Caldwell didn't wait. At 2 a.m., trucks rolled up to Layla's newsroom. Men in dark suits, flashing credentials. They called it a compliance inspection. Within minutes, the servers were boxed, the newsroom locked down. Jonah cursed under his breath. "He's trying to choke distribution." Maya grabbed her phone. Then we bypass it. Peer-to-peer, mirror sites, anonymous leaks. We uploaded everything to multiple encrypted servers, blasting it across networks too tangled for Caldwell to strangle. By 3 a.m., the files were already circulating. Hashtags began trending. Track her Caldwell files. Shah's energy empire exposed. And then, at 4 a.m., the counterstrike. A video, slickly produced, went live on Caldwell's official channel. His lawyers laid out the forged emails like gospel, overlaying them with my face, my name, and the word accomplice. They played clips of me speaking, chopped and rearranged to sound damning. For every truth we put out, he answered with a lie twice as polished. By dawn, the world was split. Half the headlines screamed about his empire unraveling. The other half screamed about me. I sat on the edge of Maya's desk, exhausted, my pulse racing. "He's poisoning the water faster than we can clean it." Maya touched my arm. "That's why we need one more thing, something he can't spin." Jonah leaned forward. "The wire transfer into his personal account. The one no shell company can explain. We know it exists. We just haven't found it yet." Adrian, who had been silent until now, lifted his head. His face was pale, hollow. "I can get it," he whispered. We turned to him. Adrian's hands trembled. Caldwell made me sit in on those transactions. He trusted me to push the paperwork through. I know where he hid it, but if I do this, he'll kill me. The room fell silent. I locked eyes with him, every memory of betrayal and rage pressing down. This was the man who had destroyed me, yet he was also the key to destroying Caldwell. Finally, I said, "Then you don't do it alone, we go together." Outside, the first light of morning cut through the blinds. The world was already at war with the truth, and the only way to end it was to walk into Caldwell's vault and steal the proof that could topple him for good. By the time dawn broke fully, we were already moving. Caldwell had the headlines, but if Adrian was right, we had something stronger. The one transfer that couldn't be explained away, even by his empire of lies. Adrian sat in the back seat, pale and sweating. Jonah drove, eyes flicking to the rear view every few seconds. Maya sat beside me, a laptop open on her knees, her fingers flying. "We'll need the login tokens," she muttered. "If Adrian's telling the truth." The records are stored in Caldwell's offshore servers, mirrored through a private bank in the Caymans. We're talking layers of encryption stacked on top of shell accounts. Adrian licked his lips. "I know the passphrase. He made me memorize it." Jonah snorted. "Convenient." Adrian's voice broke. "Do you think I want to be here? Do you think I want to be Caldwell's loose end? This is survival for me too." Silence filled the car until Maya's laptop beeped. She looked up, eyes wide. "We're in, or at least in the first layer." The address Adrian gave led us to a sterile office park on the outskirts of Houston. From the outside, it looked like any other bland corporate suite. But inside, behind frosted glass and locked steel doors, was one of Caldwell's data vaults, a physical node tied directly to his offshore empire. We used Jonah's forged credentials to slip past security. Every step echoed. My hands were clammy around the bat I still carried, my weapon of choice in a world of polished weapons. Inside, rows of humming servers filled the air with static. Screens glowed faintly in the dark. Maya plugged in, her brow furrowed. "Adrian, the passphrase, now." He swallowed, then recited slowly. "Prometheus burns, but the fire lives on." The screen blinked, access granted. Jonah let out a low whistle. Caldwell's poetic. Files cascaded across the monitor. Bank statements, wire transfers, correspondence. And then, the one we were looking for. A direct transfer of $42 million into an account under Richard Caldwell's own name. No shell company, no disguise. Just greed, naked and clear. Maya gasped. "This is it! This is the bullet!" Adrian's face went gray. "You don't understand. That transfer, it wasn't just money. It was a payment, a payoff. Caldwell bribed an entire port authority to look the other way while he shipped containers overseas. If this leaks, it doesn't just take him down. It implicates governments." I stared at the numbers on the screen. Proof, real proof. Enough to break him wide open, but also dangerous enough to make powerful enemies turn on us. Jonah moved closer. "Copy it, now." Maya's hands flew. The data bar filled, 10%, 25%, 40%. A sharp click echoed through the room. We froze. From the doorway, a figure stepped in. Black suit, calm eyes. Not a rent-a-guard, a professional. His voice was smooth, almost bored. "Step away from the terminal. You've taken enough already." Behind him, 2 more men appeared, guns raised. Adrian whimpered. "He sent them. Caldwell knows we're here." My grip tightened on the bat. My pulse thundered. We had the proof, but only if we survived the next 5 minutes. And Caldwell had just made sure those 5 minutes would be hell. The vault hummed around us, rows of servers glowing like silent witnesses. The transfer file sat mid-download, progress bar frozen at 42%. 3 men blocked the doorway, guns raised. The leader's eyes stayed locked on me, calm and unreadable. "Step away," he repeated. "You won't make it out alive if you keep pushing." Jonah shifted, gun drawn, steady but outnumbered. Maya's hands hovered over the keyboard, torn between fight and finish. Adrian pressed himself against the wall, trembling. I lifted the bat, my grip tight. My voice came out steady despite the storm in my chest. "If Caldwell wants to stop me, he'll have to kill me himself. You're just hired hands." The leader's mouth twitched, almost amused. Brave words, but bravery isn't bulletproof. Before he could signal, Jonah fired first. The shot cracked through the vault, shattering the tense silence. One of the men dropped, clutching his shoulder. Chaos erupted. "Finish the download," Jonah barked. Maya's fingers flew. The bar ticked forward. 58%, 72%, 89%. The second guard lunged at Jonah, gun skidding across the floor. They grappled, fists slamming against steel cabinets. The leader turned toward me. For a split second, the world slowed. His gun rose, my bat swung. The crack of metal on bone was deafening. The gun fired, the bullet whizzing past my ear, close enough to singe. He stumbled, blood at his temple, but didn't go down. 100%, Maya screamed. "I've got it." The server beeped, files locked onto an encrypted drive. Proof? The bullet we'd been chasing. But the leader lunged again, and this time his hand closed around my throat. His grip was iron, squeezing, my vision narrowing into black spots. "You think this ends, Caldwell?" he hissed. "Caldwell doesn't end. You do." Adrian shouted, voice breaking. "Let her go!" He grabbed the fallen guard's weapon with shaking hands, pointing it at the leader. "Do it," I choked, my vision fading. For a moment, Adrian froze. The man who had betrayed me, who had ruined me. Then he pulled the trigger. The leader staggered back, shock in his eyes, then crumpled to the floor. Silence swallowed the room, broken only by the hum of the servers. I collapsed, coughing, throat raw. Jonah and Maya rushed to me, pulling me upright. Adrian stood frozen, gun still in his hands, his face pale as death. We had the proof. We were alive, barely. But as I looked at Adrian, trembling, broken, murderer now as well as traitor, I realized the war wasn't over, because Caldwell hadn't lost yet. And if I knew him at all, he was already preparing his next move. The encrypted drive felt heavy in my hand, heavier than any weapon I'd ever carried. Inside was the truth, raw and undeniable. The $42 million transfer that tied Caldwell's empire directly to his name. No shells, no lies, just him. We left the vault bruised, bleeding, but alive. By the time the sun climbed high, Maya was already transmitting the file to every regulator, journalist, and committee on her contact list. Jonah stayed glued to the phone, coordinating with federal agents to secure the servers before Caldwell could wipe them. And Adrian, he sat in silence, the gun still trembling in his hand until Jonah finally pried it away. His eyes were empty, his betrayal burned out, leaving only ash. At noon, the world stopped. Layla's emergency report went live across every major network. The headline roared, "Caldwell transfer exposed. Direct bribery tied to CEO." The document flashed across screens, the account numbers and Caldwell's signature scrolling in black and white. No spin, no denials could cover it. For the first time, Caldwell's mask cracked. That afternoon, he appeared at a press conference, the same podium where he'd smiled the day before. But this time, the smile was gone. His lawyers flanked him, pale and grim. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras rolled. The world smelled blood. Caldwell leaned forward, gripping the podium with white knuckles. "This is a fabrication," he insisted. But his voice lacked its usual polish. "An attack on my reputation by a scorned woman and her criminal husband." Jonah smirked at the TV. He's sweating. Then Maya cut him off. "Wait, look at the crawl." Across the bottom of the screen, live footage rolled from Washington, the Department of Justice announcing Caldwell's indictment on charges of bribery, racketeering, and fraud. And not just him, senators, port officials, bank executives, a whole list of names. Caldwell's empire wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'd imagined this day 1,000 times. Caldwell humbled, his lies exposed. But reality was messier. There were still threats, still dangers, still the long grind of trials. But the truth was out, and the world had seen it. That night, I sat alone on my porch, the house quiet for the first time in weeks. The mortgage papers were still stacked on the counter, reminders of the ruin Adrian had dragged me into. But now there was also hope, not of getting everything back, but of finally standing on ground that was mine again. Adrian was taken into custody, not by Caldwell's men this time, but by the feds. He went quietly, no protests, no excuses. I watched him leave without a word. Betrayer, accomplice, and at the very end, reluctant savior. His chapter in my life was over. Jonah called as the sun dipped low. "You did it, Vess. Caldwell's finished." I closed my eyes, listening to the quiet hum of the city. We did it, I corrected. Revenge hadn't rebuilt the past. It hadn't erased the betrayal, but it gave me something Adrian had stolen, something Caldwell had tried to crush. Control. Control of my story, my voice, my future. And as I sat there, the Texas night stretching wide and endless, I realized something else. Justice wasn't about erasing the scars. It was about wearing them, sharp and visible, so no one could mistake what I had survived. The war was over, the king had fallen, and I was still standing,